Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of planting on our deck. I am really looking forward to this just to bring some more life to our deck. We recently refinished it, so we had to remove everything off of the deck and strip it and power wash it and do all of the things that you do when you are redoing a deck. And now it's kind of like, okay, we're in the clear, everything is cured, and now I get to come in and bring some of my plants back on here. I have some beautiful trees that we're going to be planting today in some containers, and a little bit of fall color action going on today, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to, especially because we use our deck a lot. We have been under construction for feels like forever, but it's actually been 3 years. So we don't have a dining room yet, and our kitchen is almost done, but in the meantime, we have been using our deck a lot. So even in the winter time, it's something that we like to come outside and utilize. So to have plants in here is really important and crucial to us, just to kind of have that indoor outdoor living that we love and admire so much. So anyways, let me show you the trees that we're going to be planting today. I want to talk to you a little bit about container planting in terms of trees, and kind of some things that you have to think about if you plan on planting trees in containers, and then we would just jump right in. So ever since we installed our 16-foot slider, we have just been using and loving this space even more. We like to keep the doors wide open so that way we just get a full view of the garden. And to be able to have plants on the deck is going to just be that, almost like that stepping stone before you enter the actual garden. So as soon as you step out of our dining room, you are automatically already starting to feel like you're surrounded by trees and nature, which again is something I really love. And these are the containers that we are going to be planting up today. I love these because they're very simple. They're tall, so they have a lot of vertical interest, and they come with inserts. So we're not planting directly into the container, which is nice because I'm not going to have to fill these all the way up with soil, which again is a win-win for me. Now, the great thing about these containers is I can shift them around, anywhere we want to plant them, but I want to keep them in this area for now just because it forks our grill. So I think that's kind of a nice symmetrical situation that we have going on here. Obviously, I've talked about the siding. We're in the middle of still doing that. We need to finish it. And I think once this area is all done and we have this drain kind of moved out of here too, it's just going to look even better. But for me, at least if we can have the containers done and planted, it's just one less thing to think about, and it's one more thing that we get to enjoy immediately and not wait on the projects finishing up around us. So one of the great things about planting trees in containers is if you have an urban garden, it's a great way to transform your small space to feel like you're in a garden. When you plant a tree in a container and you put it out on your terrace or your little deck or whatever outdoor space that you do have, it immediately just transforms that space, and it makes you feel like you're surrounded by beauty and greenery, which I think is just so important to have that in our lives. Now, in larger gardens, when you add a potted tree, it immediately adds drama and just a grand stature to any space. If you have a deck like we do, or just any open patio situation, or even in your actual garden, just potted trees just are a focal point, and it allows you to just do something a little bit more interesting versus just planting them into the ground. Another way that you can use potted trees is if you have a big entryway or just any entryway that you want to fork on either side with trees. Again, it immediately just creates that welcoming feeling, and you're immediately transported into a garden, and it just adds so much to so many spaces. I love container gardening, but I think when you add trees to containers, if you can, I think that's even more special. When you're selecting a tree to plant in a container, you're going to follow the same steps that you would when you're planting a tree into your garden. You want to think about lighting. How much light does this tree need? You want to think about growth rate. How quickly is this tree going to grow? Because you certainly don't want to plant a tree in a container that is going to be fast growing, and you're not going to get to enjoy it as much as you would had you selected something that's slow growing. And you also want to consider size. Obviously that goes with the container and with the tree. You don't want to select a tree that's going to get huge because I mean, it's just not going to be practical for that plant and or that tree, and it's not going to be happy in that container at all. And remember, you are creating an artificial space for this plant because trees or anything really, they want to be in the ground. So selecting the right container, the right tree is really important. So just remember that when you're selecting your trees, whether it be maples or conifers, there's a lot of citrus that do so well in containers. In fact, I love a potted lemon tree or a fig tree, and it's also feeding you, which is that added bonus. But just keep in mind where you're going to plant it, what kind of protection it's going to have, what kind of lighting requirement they're going to have, and what size are they going to be and how fast they're going to grow. That will all help you determine and select the perfect specimen for your container. So let's get into the trees that we are going to be planting today. I have 2 lace leaf green maples here, and I'll pop up the exact name for you guys on the screen, but I believe these get about 6 feet tall and wide over 10 years. So they're slow growing and they're going to be fine in these containers. And I have one more over here. So these 2 are the same tree, just a little bit more different branching situation, which I actually like. Originally, I was going to use this one here, which is a Makawa Katsuba, I think. I'll put up the name on the screen for you guys. And this is a really great maple too. This one doesn't get too big as well. And I love the structure of the leaves. This container here, I'm not going to pot up. This is going to remain in the container. I kind of cheated a little bit. There's actually a crate holding this up like this. It's just too big of a container and it didn't have an insert. So I might do something else with this tree, but I just brought it back here just because, again, it adds that beautiful vertical interest and it makes the space look a lot taller. Fiddle Leaf Frank is just hanging out here until I find a new home for him before we bring him inside. Now these are going to be the other little maples that we are going to be planting in the smaller containers. And this one here is a Crimson Queen lace leaf maple. And look, these are from my Zelly. And let's see, this one gets 7 feet tall, 10 feet wide, and it's hardy in -20 to -10. So that is something else that you want to consider when you're selecting a tree, is what gardening zone you're in. You want to make sure that you select a tree that can withstand 2 zones below yours. So if we garden in zone 8B here in Oregon, and I would select something that it can go probably down to like zone 6, because these trees are going to be in containers and they're not going to have the same type of insulation that they would if they were planted in ground. So that is also something you want to consider. All right, and this one here is a Spring Delight lace leaf maple, and same height and width, 7 feet tall, 10 feet wide. I like this one because it has just a little bit more of a green and a pinker tone in the fall time, versus the crimson is kind of a deeper green and reddish during the growing season, and then in the fall time it just turns into this beautiful crimson color. I love it so much. And we are going to be planting around our maples because we want to make sure that everything is looking cohesive and pretty, and there's something below the canopy drawing our eyes over there, especially when they lose all of their leaves. We'll still have interest and color in the container. So for that, because we are heading into fall, I chose our basic fall plants that I think we all love, pack a punch of color, are easy, fun, and come in so many variations. We're going to be using pansies. These are, let's see, I think one of them is just called Pure Red, and this one is just called Blotch Warm Shades. Not very descriptive, but this is the time of year where you're just going to find the most incredible colored pansies. And I thought I would go with red and also this yellow with that burgundy center. I think that's just going to be interesting. And I also picked up some green Creeping Jenny, which flowers. It has these little yellow flowers, which I think will play off on some of these other pansies. And this one can grow up to 2 inches tall, and then it's a creeping plant, so it can really just go to town, and you want to plant them about 12 inches apart. I thought about those in our tallest container just because there's a lot of concrete going on here. You see that? So I think by having something cascade over will kind of break up that concrete a little bit. So I'll plant 2 in each of the large containers. All right, so we have our plants, we have our containers. Now I'm going to go grab some potting soil, which is something that you want to use when you're planting in containers. You don't want to use normal garden soil because over time that is going to compact and it's going to be an issue for drainage. You're not going to have that good drainage like you would using potting soil, and you want to use something clean, so clean potting soil. That way you're not introducing any sort of bugs or bacteria or other things like that that you normally could find in garden soil. So keep that in mind. A good potting soil is really important, especially if you plan on leaving these trees in these containers for the next several years. I will also give them a little sprinkle of Biotone starter fertilizer. I'm not going to go too heavy on the fertilizing because we are entering fall, so these are not going to really put on a lot of growth, but I just want to make sure that they have something to help their roots, especially with that transplant. I just want to make sure that they're happy and you know, they're not going to freak out when I plant them. It's really warm today, but I think we're going to be okay. In the springtime, I will come in and do another round of fertilizing, like a slow release fertilizer, and just kind of stay on top of that throughout the year, just because they are in containers. So the only nutrients that they're going to be getting is what you provide them. Again, thinking back, you're putting them in an artificial situation. This is not their normal growing habit, right? They don't grow in containers. So we need to be responsible for watering them and for feeding them more so than we would with anything else that we plant in the ground, because that, you know, they can find their own nutrients. They can, their roots can grow out and they can search for nutrients that way. So we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get them all planted. All right, what do we think? I love the way this turned out. Immediate satisfaction, immediate color, immediate texture. I love it so much. I went ahead and also plopped in a heuchera down here, but I also have this other heuchera. So the one that we have here is called stainless steel. This one is called obsidian, which is just has a darker foliage. And I think I actually want to put that one there, but I only have one. So I'm going to use that as a holding place. They're not planted. I just put them in the actual container itself. But you guys, look at how beautiful this looks. Now again, as far as maintenance go, we are responsible for giving these trees everything that they need to thrive for the next few years. I'm going to make sure that I fertilize them again in the springtime, probably beginning of spring, late spring, summertime. I'll probably give them a good dose of fertilizing. If I continue planting annuals in here, they'll also get a little bit of fertilizer because I do fertilizer annuals. But if you don't plant annuals with your trees, make sure you're giving them maybe like a slow release fertilizer, or you can also put in Treatone in your containers. That will also help them. But again, you want to make sure that you think about it's a commitment. Think about it being a commitment, because it is a commitment. These trees aren't going to get the nutrients that they typically would when they're in the ground. And you also want to make sure you stay on top of watering, especially in the summertime when it gets really warm. These are pretty close to our hose, so I didn't add them to our drip system, but if they were out in the landscape, I would 100% put them on drip, because that's just going to be one less thing that you have to think about. So these will just keep a close eye on and water them probably every other day. And you also want to make sure you're watering your trees in the wintertime. We often forget to water our potted plants. I am notorious for forgetting until I come out and I'm like, oh, I forgot to water you guys, and it's been like 3 weeks. So I will come in and make sure to give them a little bit of water. And when you're watering your trees, you want to make sure that you don't just, if you're using a hose, you don't want to just go and then walk away. You want to make sure that you do it for about 10 seconds to 20 seconds, depending on how big your container is. And you want to see that there's water coming down. You want to make sure that the water is draining all the way through your container, especially if you have a bigger one, to make sure that that soil is completely saturated and it's properly watered. So keep that in mind. I often see people just do a little like shh, and then they walk away, and I'm like, that's not enough water. Again, they're in an artificial growing environment, so it's up to us as their plant parents to take good care of them. We're going to water them good, and we're going to fertilize them good. One more quick thing I wanted to touch on is containers. When you're selecting your container, make sure you have something that has good drainage. That is so important. I typically will drill extra holes on our containers just because I always feel like one hole just isn't enough. So you can actually buy special drill bits, and you can drill into concrete containers pretty easily with those special drill bits. Just that way, it ensures that you're getting that proper drainage that these plants will need. Also think about how heavy duty your containers are. Selecting ones that have a thicker wall are going to do better out in the elements because they're going to have that extra insulation. The containers I used are pretty thin, and they're kind of like a fiberglass material, I believe. And they're pretty thin, so I typically wouldn't use these out in the elements. One, because they might blow over pretty easily, especially because these trees are a little bit top heavy, so just a gust of a wind can knock them over. So think about that as well. And two, they're not really going to be insulated out there in these thin containers, which I realize they're going to be on the deck. They're going to be protected from everything that's going on out there. And if I have to, because we do have an open deck, I can always scooch them closer to the house where they're going to be just fine throughout the winter time. So think about that. Containers, you can really just, that's the great thing about containers, is there's so many different shapes and sizes, and you can really just select something that's going to be perfect for your planting situation. And just one more look at how beautiful this space looks with these trees. I absolutely love it. We are at sunset, so we have kind of that golden hour lighting right now, but I just wanted to show you again up close and personal how pretty everything turned out. I am so pleased at the way that this turned out. I love it even more. This immediately transformed the space to feel a lot cozier and more welcoming and inviting. Again, we constantly use the space. We grill probably every day, so we're constantly using the space. And now just to have something beautiful to look at when we're out here is just even more magical. And with the color that those pansies are bringing in, I'm so excited about, because pansies I feel like they're one of those flowers that don't get enough credit, but they really put on like a show for us and carry us over in the winter months and in the cooler months. And they just look pretty for us all winter long over here. So I'm excited to have that. And I think my stepdad is trying to come onto the deck because he is going to be grilling some fish that we caught the other day, which I'm excited to eat. And yeah, thank you again so much for hanging out with me today in my garden, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.